When I first got the email, I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the same cup of coffee I'd been nursing for hours. It was cold by now, untouched, much like everything else in this house since Emily had died. Everything felt wrong without her. Too quiet, too empty, like I was living inside someone else's life. I was just existing, going through the motions, trying to make sense of it all. But sense wasn't something you could find in the sudden loss of the person you loved most in the world. The email popped up on my laptop out of nowhere. The subject line simple, almost too ordinary, except for the gut punch it carried. You didn't know everything about Emily. I blinked at it, unsure if I was imagining things. For a moment, I thought it might be some kind of sick spam, but no. My name was there in the body of the email. The message wasn't long. Ethan, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Emily was hiding things from you. She wasn't who you thought she was. There's more to the story. You deserve to know. I stared at the words, heart pounding in my chest. I could almost hear it thudding in my ears, that sick, anxious feeling creeping up my spine. I didn't want to believe it. My hands shook as I clicked the email shut, slamming the laptop closed like that would make it all disappear. Emily had just died a few months ago. A car accident. Sudden. I never got to say goodbye. And now this? The idea that there were things she kept from me felt impossible. Emily was my world. We shared everything, or at least I thought we had. For days, I tried to ignore it. I pushed it aside, told myself it was just someone trying to mess with me while I was vulnerable. People were cruel like that sometimes, but the email didn't leave me. It lingered, like a weight pressing down on my chest every time I closed my eyes. I couldn't stop thinking about it, wondering if there was something I missed, something I hadn't seen. Had Emily really been hiding something from me? No, it wasn't possible. We were happy. We were solid. We had to be. I loved her. She loved me, right? I started checking her phone, even though it felt like a violation. Her passwords were all the same. I'd known them for years. But there was nothing unusual, nothing out of place. Texts between us, old photos, conversations with her mom. Normal. Too normal. It wasn't until I started digging into her emails that I found something. A thread I didn't recognize. A conversation with someone I'd never heard of before. Ben. I felt sick reading the messages between them. At first, they seemed harmless, professional even. Emily worked in marketing, and her job required her to network all the time. But the more I read, the less innocent it became. There were hints in the language, little moments that felt too personal, too familiar. I scrolled back through the history, finding older and older messages, flirtatious comments, inside jokes I didn't understand. And then finally I found it. A single email that tore through me like a bullet. "I can't wait to see you again," Emily had written. "Last night was amazing." My hands went cold, my throat tightened, and I had to swallow down the bile rising in my chest. Amazing. She'd called it amazing. What the hell did that mean? My fingers trembled as I kept scrolling, looking for more. She hadn't deleted anything, like she didn't think she needed to hide it, like she'd gotten away with it. And maybe she had, until now. I dropped my phone on the table, staring at it as if it had betrayed me. No, she had betrayed me. The woman I loved, the woman I married, had been lying to me. How could I not have seen it? How could I have been so blind? I felt a mix of anger and sadness clawing at my chest, battling each other for control. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, break something, do anything to get rid of the sickening feeling of betrayal that was wrapping itself around my heart. But all I could do was sit there, the room spinning around me. My wife had cheated on me, and I never even knew. For hours, I stayed at that table, staring at nothing, trying to figure out what to do next. What could I do? She was gone. There was no confrontation to be had, no fight, no closure. She had died, and I was left with nothing but this horrible truth, like an open wound that would never heal. I thought about the email, about the person who sent it. Whoever they were, they knew. They knew something I didn't, something they thought I should know. I went back to the laptop, reopening the email and reading it again. There was no name, no signature, just the message. You deserve to know. Deserve. Did I? Did I really want to know the full extent of her betrayal? Would it help, or would it just make everything worse? I wasn't sure, but I knew I couldn't just leave it. Not anymore. I needed answers, no matter how much they might hurt. The next few days were a blur. I barely slept. I spent hours poring over Emily's digital life, searching for anything that would make sense of it all. I wanted to know who Ben was, how long this had been going on, and why. Why had she done this to me? What had I missed? Every clue felt like a punch to the gut, every unanswered question like a weight pressing down on my chest. And yet, no matter how much I uncovered, it didn't satisfy the gnawing hole inside me. Then, another email came. This one was just as brief, but somehow even more chilling. "You're getting close. Keep digging." That was it. Just those 5 words, but they were enough to push me over the edge. I couldn't just sit in the dark anymore. I had to know everything. I had to find out who was sending these messages and what else they knew about my wife. I had to confront Ben. I found him easily enough. He worked at the same company as Emily in the design department. They'd collaborated on a few projects together. It was almost too easy. I tracked him down to a coffee shop one afternoon, sitting in the corner with his laptop, just like any other normal person. He didn't look like the kind of guy who would destroy someone's marriage. He looked ordinary, bland even. But I knew better now. People weren't always what they seemed. I sat down across from him without a word, and his eyes flicked up to meet mine, confused at first, then wary. "Ethan, right?" he asked, his voice casual, but I could see the nervousness behind his eyes. He knew why I was there. "You know why I'm here," I said, my voice flat. I didn't have the energy to beat around the bush. I was done with pretending. "You were with my wife." Ben blinked, his expression shifting from confusion to guilt in an instant. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, as if he wasn't sure what to say. "Look, man, I didn't mean for it to happen," he said, his voice low. I don't care about your excuses," I cut him off, leaning forward. "I just want to know the truth. How long? How long were you with her?" He swallowed hard, glancing around the coffee shop like he was hoping someone would rescue him from this conversation. But no one was paying attention to us. It was just me and him. "A few months," he admitted finally. It wasn't serious, not like that. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't want to hurt you." "Yeah, well, you did," I said, my voice tight. "And now she's dead, so there's no fixing it, is there?" Ben flinched at my words, guilt written all over his face. I should have felt satisfaction in that, but all I felt was emptiness. I pushed back from the table, standing up. "I hope it was worth it," I muttered, turning to leave. But as I walked away, something stopped me, a thought I couldn't shake. Ben knew about the affair, but did he know about the emails? Did he know who was sending them? I turned back to him, and he looked up, startled. "One more thing," I said. "Have you been sending me emails?" He looked genuinely confused, shaking his head. "What? No, I haven't contacted you at all. I didn't even know you knew about us." I stared at him, trying to gauge if he was lying, but he seemed sincere. If he wasn't the one sending the messages, then who was? Someone else knew about Emily's affair, someone who wanted me to keep digging. I couldn't let it go. Even after confronting Ben, after hearing him admit to the affair, something still felt off. He didn't seem like the kind of guy who'd orchestrate this kind of thing, sending cryptic emails after Emily's death, dragging me deeper into this nightmare. But if it wasn't him, then who? Who knew about Emily's affair, and why did they want me to keep digging? I spent the next few days going through every corner of her life again, searching for any clue, any sign of who might be behind the emails. It was maddening, but I couldn't stop myself. The more I looked, the more I realized just how little I had known about Emily toward the end. I had been so focused on work, on my projects, that I had missed the signs. Late nights at the office, mysterious texts that she'd dismiss with a smile, the way she'd started pulling away. Maybe I didn't want to see it. Maybe I had been too wrapped up in the version of her I thought I knew. But now I was seeing it all, and it hurt like hell. I found old messages between her and her best friend, Julia. They'd been close for years. Since college, really. I always liked Julia, though she and I weren't particularly close. I guess I assumed she was just a part of Emily's life that didn't overlap with mine. But now, I couldn't help but wonder how much Julia knew. Did she know about Ben? Had she helped Emily hide it? I knew I had to find out. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about understanding the person I had been married to, the person I thought I had spent my life with. I needed answers, so I called Julia. When she picked up, her voice was soft, cautious. "Hey, Ethan, it's been a while. How are you holding up?" I could hear the concern in her voice, but I wasn't in the mood for small talk. "I'm fine, Julia. I need to ask you something." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Okay," she said carefully. "What is it?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Did you know about Emily and Ben?" The silence that followed was deafening. I could almost hear her weighing her options, deciding how much to tell me. Finally, she spoke. "Ethan, I didn't want to get involved. It wasn't my place." "So you did know," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "You knew she was cheating on me, and you didn't say anything." "It wasn't that simple," Julia said, a note of frustration creeping into her voice. "I tried to talk to her about it, okay? I told her it was a mistake, that she needed to figure things out with you. But she wasn't ready to hear it. She was confused." "Confused?" I repeated, my anger rising. "What the hell does that mean, Julia?" "It means she was dealing with a lot, Ethan. More than you know." There it was again. The implication that Emily had been hiding something from me, that there was more to the story than just an affair. I gripped the phone tighter. "What are you talking about?" Julia hesitated, and I could hear the tension in her voice when she finally responded. "Emily, she was different toward the end. She was obsessed with this idea of alternate lives, other versions of herself. She kept talking about how things could have been different if she'd made different choices. It was weird. She wasn't herself." Alternate lives. The phrase hit me like a brick to the chest. I had heard her mention it before, usually in passing, but I had never taken it seriously. I thought it was just one of those philosophical things people get hung up on sometimes. But now, hearing Julia talk about it, I wondered if it was more than that. "What do you mean, alternate lives?" I asked, my voice low. Julia sighed. "I don't know how to explain it." She got really into these theories about parallel universes, about how every decision we make creates a new reality where we made a different choice. She said she could feel it, like there were other versions of her out there, living different lives. I thought it was just a phase, but she wouldn't let it go. My head was spinning. Emily had never talked to me about any of this, at least not in any way that made it seem serious. But if she had been thinking about other lives, other choices, what did that mean? Was her affair with Ben just a part of that? Some kind of escape from the life she thought she was stuck in? Did she ever, I don't know, talk about me, about us? I asked, my throat tight. "Yeah," Julia said softly. "She loved you, Ethan, but I think she felt like she was losing herself. She didn't know how to balance who she was with who she wanted to be. I think that's why she did what she did. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. I had always thought our life together was good, solid, but maybe that had been my perspective, not hers. Maybe she had been struggling in ways I never saw. Why didn't she talk to me about this?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I don't know," Julia said quietly. "Maybe she didn't want to hurt you. Maybe she didn't know how to explain it. I don't think even she fully understood what she was feeling." I hung up the phone, feeling more lost than ever. Emily had been living in a world I didn't understand, hiding parts of herself from me, and now she was gone. I had no way of getting those answers from her. But I wasn't ready to stop digging. Julia had given me a lead, a glimpse into Emily's mind toward the end. If she had been obsessed with these ideas about alternate lives, maybe that was the key to understanding why she had an affair, why she kept it from me. I started looking into her work, searching for any connection to these theories Julia mentioned. Emily had always been a practical person, grounded in her career, but maybe there was something there, something in her projects that tied into this obsession she had. That's when I found it, an old research paper buried in her files, co-authored by one of her colleagues. The topic? The psychological effects of hypothetical alternate realities. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd expect from someone working in marketing, but there it was, clear as day. Emily had been involved in something deeper, something more complicated than I could have imagined. The more I read, the more I realized this wasn't just a passing interest for her. She had been studying this, theories about how people perceive their own lives, how they cope with the idea that every decision they make splits off into a new reality. And then there was a section about temporal dissonance, a concept that suggested some people could feel the effects of their alternate selves, even if they weren't aware of it. It was like a punch to the gut. Was that what had happened to Emily? Had she felt like she was living someone else's life? Was her affair with Ben part of that? An attempt to live out some version of herself that had made a different choice? It didn't make the betrayal any easier to stomach, but it gave me something to hold on to. A reason, maybe, for why she had done what she did. I couldn't ask her about it, couldn't confront her, but I could try to understand. I spent days researching, diving deeper into the world Emily had been immersed in before she died. The more I uncovered, the more I realized she had been keeping secrets about her work, her thoughts, her life. It was like peeling back layers of a person I thought I knew, only to find a stranger underneath. And the emails kept coming, each one more cryptic than the last. "You're closer than you think," one of them read, "but you're not there yet." I had no idea what they meant. Who was sending them? How did they know about Emily's obsession with alternate realities? And what did they want me to find? It felt like I was being led down a path, but I didn't know where it would end. Every step I took brought me closer to something, but I wasn't sure what that something was. I didn't know if it would give me closure or just break me even further. But I couldn't stop. I had to know the truth. Even if it destroyed everything I thought I knew about Emily and about myself. I had thought I was prepared for anything by this point. The grief, the betrayal, the unraveling of who Emily really was, none of it had broken me yet, though it had come close. But as I dove deeper into her life, I realized there was something much stranger, much darker, lying just beneath the surface. It started small, as these things often do, with odd, disconnected details. Things in our house felt off. It was as if memories I had of Emily, of us, didn't quite fit anymore. I'd walk into the kitchen and feel like something had moved, but I couldn't pinpoint what. Our wedding photo, which had always been on the mantel, suddenly felt like it didn't belong there, like it was from someone else's life. Little things, subtle, but enough to keep gnawing at me, making me feel like I was slowly losing my mind. Then there was the matter of the emails. They hadn't stopped, though they were becoming less frequent, more cryptic. I'd get a notification and feel that familiar jolt of anxiety, the anticipation of what they would reveal next. But the messages had changed. No longer were they just nudges, urging me to dig deeper. Now they were more personal. "You're starting to see the truth," one had read. Another had said, "Do you feel it yet? The cracks?" I didn't know what the hell that meant, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever was behind them knew far more than I did. And it terrified me. It was around this time that I began to lose track of time. Days bled into each other, the hours slipping away like sand through my fingers. I'd spend hours researching, reading everything I could about Emily's work, her obsession with alternate realities, and the more I learned, the more distant I felt from the life we'd shared. It was like I was slowly becoming untethered from my own reality, slipping into the space between lives, just like she had. One night, as I sat at my desk surrounded by papers and open tabs on my laptop, my phone buzzed with a new email. I glanced at it, expecting another cryptic message, but this one was different. It was from an unknown sender, with the subject line, "You need to meet him." My heart skipped a beat. Who was him? I opened the email and found only an address and a time. Tuesday, 3 p.m. He'll explain everything. My first instinct was to delete the email. It felt like a trap, like I was being lured into something far beyond my control. But the curiosity, the desperate need for answers, won out. I couldn't keep going like this, grasping at shadows and half-truths. I needed to confront whoever was behind this. I needed to know what Emily had been involved in and why it was haunting me now. So when Tuesday came, I found myself standing outside an old, nondescript building in the industrial part of town. The place looked abandoned, with faded paint and boarded-up windows. The only sign of life was a flickering light above the door. I checked my watch, 3 p.m. exactly. I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing with doubts. What if this was a mistake? What if I was about to walk into something I couldn't handle? But then I thought of Emily, of everything I'd uncovered, and I steeled myself. I needed answers. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The building was eerily quiet, the air thick with dust. The hallway stretched out in front of me, dimly lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. At the end of the hall, I saw a door slightly ajar, a faint glow coming from inside. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached, my footsteps echoing off the walls. I pushed the door open and stepped into a small, cluttered room. Papers and books were scattered across a desk, and in the middle of the room sat a man, his back to me, hunched over a set of blueprints. He didn't turn around when I entered. "You came," he said, his voice calm, almost casual. "I wasn't sure if you would." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my nerves. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice sounding smaller than I'd intended. "What is all this? Why am I here?" The man finally turned to face me, and I was taken aback by how ordinary he looked. Late 40s, graying hair, glasses perched on the edge of his nose. He could have been anyone, a professor, an accountant. But there was something in his eyes, something sharp, calculating. "I suppose you could say I'm a colleague of your wife's," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "She and I work together on certain projects." I didn't move. "Projects? Like what? What the hell is going on?" The man sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I know you've been digging into Emily's life. You've discovered a lot, but there's so much more you don't understand. Emily was special. She had a unique gift, an ability to perceive things most people can't. She could see the fractures between realities, the places where our choices diverge and create new paths." I stared at him, my mind reeling. "What are you talking about? This is insane." He nodded slowly. "I know it sounds that way, but I'm telling you the truth. Emily was able to tap into something very few people ever do, and once she started, she couldn't stop. She became obsessed with the idea that there were other versions of herself, versions that had made different choices, lived different lives, and she wasn't wrong." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "So, what? She had an affair because of this? Because she thought she was living the wrong life?" The man shook his head. "No, the affair was complicated. It wasn't just about wanting something different. It was about trying to understand who she was in all these different versions of herself. She wanted to experience life as someone else, to see what it felt like to live a different reality. And Ben was part of that." My stomach turned. "So what? She just used me? Used our marriage as some kind of experiment?" The man's expression softened, and for the first time, I saw a hint of sympathy in his eyes. "No, Ethan, she loved you. She really did. But this was bigger than you or her. It was about something far beyond what most people can comprehend. She was trying to reconcile all the parts of herself, the ones that existed in other timelines, other realities, and it drove her to make choices she wouldn't have made otherwise." I sank into the chair, my mind spinning. This was too much. It didn't make any sense, and yet, deep down, a part of me felt like I had always known something was wrong, something I couldn't explain. The little things I'd noticed, the sense of disconnection, the feeling that things weren't quite right. Was this what Emily had been feeling all along? Was this why she had turned to Ben? "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because you need to understand," the man said. "You're starting to experience it too, aren't you? The cracks, the dissonance, you're feeling the pull between timelines, just like Emily did." I stared at him, my heart racing. "What are you talking about? I'm not like her. I'm just trying to figure out why she did what she did." The man leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "Ethan, you've already started down the same path. The emails, the sense that something is wrong with your memories, with your reality. It's all connected. You and Emily were connected in ways you can't fully understand. And now that she's gone, that connection is unraveling. You're seeing the world the way she saw it, and if you're not careful, it will consume you just like it did her." Panic welled up inside me. "I don't want any part of this," I said, my voice shaking. "I just want my life back. I want things to make sense again." The man shook his head. "It's too late for that. The moment you started digging into Emily's life, the moment you began to question your reality, you set things in motion. There's no going back now. The only thing you can do is try to understand what's happening before it destroys you." I stood up, my legs unsteady beneath me. "No," I said, backing toward the door. "I'm done with this. I don't care about alternate realities or whatever the hell you're talking about. I just want to be left alone." The man didn't move, didn't try to stop me. "You can leave if you want," he said quietly. "But this isn't over. You'll keep feeling it, the pull, the cracks, and eventually you'll have to face it, just like Emily did." I turned and fled, the door slamming behind me as I ran out into the cold, empty street. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear, but one thought echoed louder than the rest. What if he was right? What if I was already slipping, just like Emily? I ran through the streets that day, trying to outrun the words that were now lodged in my mind. The cracks, the dissonance. The man's voice echoed in my head as I tried to convince myself that none of it was real, that it was some elaborate trick, a lie to mess with my grief, to twist my already fragile state of mind into something dark and twisted. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that he might be right. No matter how much I wanted to, I couldn't go back to the way things were before. I began noticing more cracks in my reality, moments where things felt wrong, disjointed. I would be sitting at my desk, working, and I'd have this intense déjà vu, like I had done it all before, only it was slightly different. Like the details had shifted, like the version of events I was experiencing wasn't the original one. Sometimes it was small things, like a picture on the wall that looked different than I remembered. Other times it was bigger, more unsettling. I'd catch a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror, and for a brief second, it wouldn't feel like me. It was like staring into the eyes of someone else, someone I didn't recognize. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself it was all in my head, just the stress and grief playing tricks on me. But the more I ignored it, the worse it got. I started losing track of time. Hours would slip away without me noticing, and I'd find myself standing in a room with no memory of how I got there. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, certain that something had changed, that I had missed something crucial. And all the while, the emails kept coming. "You're getting closer," one of them said, the words flashing across my phone screen in the dead of night. "But time is running out." Time. It was always about time, wasn't it? Emily had spent so much of her life chasing these ideas about alternate realities, parallel lives, and now it was all bleeding into mine. The more I thought about it, the more it consumed me. I started researching everything I could about these theories, trying to understand what she had been so obsessed with. I found forums, academic papers, even obscure blogs dedicated to people who claimed to have experienced these fractures in reality. It was all out there, hidden in plain sight. People who believed they had lived different lives, that they were slipping between timelines. But none of it gave me the answers I was looking for. None of it explained what was happening to me or why I couldn't shake this feeling that I was slowly coming undone. The only person who might have been able to explain it, Emily, was gone. Then one night, as I sat in my office, staring blankly at my computer screen, something strange happened. My phone buzzed with another email, and this time the message was different. It wasn't cryptic or vague. It was an address and a date. "Come tomorrow," it read. "This will end it." I stared at the screen, my heart racing. Whoever was behind these messages wanted me to go to this place, to meet them. I didn't know if it was a trap or if it would finally give me the closure I desperately needed. But I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep drowning in the confusion, the fear that my mind was slipping away from me. So, the next day, I went. The address led me to a rundown part of the city, a place that felt forgotten, like time itself had abandoned it. The building was nondescript, just another crumbling structure among many. But as I approached it, my skin prickled with a sense of anticipation, like I was on the verge of something big, something that would finally give me the answers I craved. I walked inside, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. The hallway stretched out in front of me, dark and uninviting. I followed it, my heart pounding in my chest, until I reached a door at the end. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Was I really ready for this? Was I ready to face whatever truth lay behind this door? Before I could talk myself out of it, I opened the door and stepped inside. The room was small, cluttered with papers and books, much like the room where I had met the man who had first told me about the cracks. But this time, there was no man. There was only a woman, sitting in the center of the room, her back to me, as she flipped through a stack of papers. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Even though I couldn't see her face, I knew who it was. I would have recognized her anywhere. "Emily," I whispered, my voice barely audible. She didn't turn around at first, as if she hadn't heard me. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my mind racing. This couldn't be real. Emily was dead. I had buried her. I had grieved for her. But now, here she was, alive, sitting in front of me like nothing had happened. Finally, she turned to face me, and my breath caught in my throat. It was her. Exactly as I remembered her, down to the way her hair fell over her shoulders, the way her eyes looked at me with that same mixture of sadness and love. "I knew you'd come," she said softly, her voice carrying the same warmth it always had. I stumbled forward, my mind reeling. How is this possible? You're supposed to be dead." She gave me a sad smile, shaking her head. "Not in this version of events, Ethan. Not in this timeline." I felt like I was going to collapse. "Timeline? What are you talking about? You died, Emily. I was there. I went to your funeral." She stood up, slowly walking toward me. "I know, in that version of our lives, I did die, but in this one, I didn't. That's the thing about reality, Ethan. It's not as fixed as you think. Every choice we make creates new branches, new paths. Some of them we live, some of them we don't, but they all exist." I shook my head, trying to make sense of what she was saying. "This doesn't make any sense. I don't understand." Emily reached out, taking my hands in hers. Her touch was warm, real. It felt like her, and yet I couldn't believe it. "I know it's hard to understand," she said gently. "But you've been feeling it too, haven't you? The cracks, the moments where things don't feel right. That's because you're slipping between realities, just like I did. You're starting to see the fractures, the places where timelines overlap." I pulled my hands away from hers, stepping back. "No, this isn't real. You're not real." Her face softened with pity, and it made my stomach turn. "I am real, Ethan, just not in the way you think. You and I, we've lived many different lives. In some, we're happy together. In others, we're not. But in every version, there's always something pulling us apart." I shook my head, trying to wrap my mind around what she was saying. "So what? This is just another version of reality? Another timeline where you didn't die? What does that mean for the life I've been living? Was any of it real?" Emily sighed, her eyes full of sadness. "It was real, Ethan. Every version of our lives is real, but they're all just pieces of a larger puzzle, fragments of a bigger picture. The life you've been living is one part of that, just like this one is." I felt like I was going to be sick. "I don't want this. I don't want to live in some fractured version of reality. I just want things to go back to the way they were." She looked at me with such tenderness, and for a moment I could almost believe that things could go back to the way they were. But deep down, I knew they couldn't. I had seen too much, learned too much. I could never go back to the life I had before. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she said softly, "but there's no going back. The cracks are already there. You've already started to slip between realities, and the more you fight it, the worse it will get." I felt a tear slip down my cheek, and I didn't bother wiping it away. "Why, Emily? Why did you do this? Why did you keep all of this from me?" She looked away, her expression pained. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I couldn't stop. Once I started to see the fractures, I had to know more. I had to understand. And then I met Ben, and he was part of that other version of my life. He was part of the path I hadn't taken with you. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did." I felt a wave of anger and hurt wash over me. "So what? You just decided to live two lives at once? One with me and one with him?" Emily shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "It wasn't like that. I loved you, Ethan. I still do. But I was caught between worlds, between versions of myself, and I didn't know how to choose." I took a deep breath, my chest tight with emotion. I stood there, staring at Emily, trying to make sense of the words spilling out of her mouth. She was standing in front of me, alive, talking about fractures in reality, alternate lives, and somehow I was supposed to accept it all as truth. My wife had been dead for months, but here she was, looking at me with eyes full of regret and sadness, telling me that her affair with Ben wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage, it was a symptom of something much bigger. But none of it mattered in that moment. All I could focus on was the fact that she had chosen him, at least in part, over me. "You didn't know how to choose?" I repeated, my voice barely holding steady. You're telling me you loved me, but you couldn't decide between me and him because of some other version of yourself? Is that supposed to make this easier for me to understand? You still betrayed me, Emily. You still lied. I know, she whispered, tears spilling from her eyes. I know I hurt you. I know it wasn't fair. But you have to understand, it wasn't just about choosing between you and Ben. It was about choosing between all the lives I could have lived, all the versions of myself that I felt pulling me in different directions. I was losing control. I took a step back, feeling my heart twist. I didn't know how to respond to that. Every part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers that would make sense of the pain I had been carrying since the moment I found out she had been unfaithful. But how could I even begin to untangle this mess? She wasn't just talking about an affair. She was talking about losing herself across multiple realities. And somehow, I was supposed to understand that? So you're saying it wasn't your fault? I asked, my voice hard. That you didn't have a choice? Is that it? Emily shook her head, wiping at her eyes. No, I'm not saying that. I made my choices, and I regret them, but I wasn't in control of what was happening to me. I was slipping, Ethan. I didn't know how to stop it. I was seeing things, feeling things from other lives, and it became impossible to tell which version of me was real. I didn't even know who I was anymore. I clenched my fists at my sides, trying to push down the rising anger. And what about me, huh? What about the life we were living together? Was that just one of your many versions, one you could walk away from because you weren't sure who you were? She flinched at my words, her face crumpling with guilt. No, I loved our life, Ethan. I loved you. But the more I slipped, the more it all felt disconnected, like I was watching it happen from the outside. I wasn't abandoning you. I was losing myself, and I didn't know how to tell you. I stared at her, struggling to find my voice. Everything she was saying made me feel like I was drowning in confusion. How could I reconcile this version of events with the woman I thought I knew? The Emily who smiled at me from across the dinner table, who held my hand when we walked through the park, who told me she loved me every night before we fell asleep. How was this the same person? Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice breaking. Why didn't you let me in, Emily? I could have helped you. I could have done something. She shook her head again, the tears still falling. I didn't know how, Ethan. I didn't even know what was happening to me at first. And by the time I realized, it was too late. I didn't want to drag you into it. I thought I could figure it out on my own. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Well, you did a hell of a job, didn't you? You figured it out all right, by cheating on me, by hiding everything until it destroyed us. Emily's face crumpled, and she looked away, her shoulders shaking. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I was lost. I stood there, feeling torn between my love for her and the crushing weight of her betrayal. I wanted to hold her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but I couldn't. Not after everything she had put me through. The anger inside me was too deep, too raw. And now what? I asked, my voice cold. You're here, telling me all of this, but what am I supposed to do with it? Am I just supposed to accept that you were living in some other reality, that you weren't really in control? Where does that leave me? Emily looked up at me, her eyes filled with pain. I don't know, she admitted. I don't have all the answers, Ethan, but I came here because I wanted you to know the truth. I wanted you to understand that I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to find a way back to myself, and I couldn't do it. I clenched my jaw, my heart aching with every word she spoke. And what about me? Where do I fit into all of this? Am I just one of the versions of your life that didn't work out? She stepped forward, reaching for me, but I pulled away. No, Ethan, it's not like that. You were everything to me. In every version of my life, I loved you, but I was broken. I didn't know how to keep it together, and I paid the price for it. I stared at her, my chest heaving with the weight of it all. The anger, the sadness, the confusion, it was all too much. I felt like I was going to explode, like my mind was being pulled apart at the seams, just like she had described. The fractures, the cracks, the dissonance. It was all there, pushing me to the edge. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice raw. Why are you here, Emily? What's the point of all of this? She stood there, silent for a moment, before looking at me with those eyes that had once brought me so much comfort. I want you to understand. I want you to forgive me, even if you can't forget what I've done. I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not in this life, not in any life. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. But I didn't know if I could give her what she was asking for. How could I forgive her for tearing my world apart? How could I forgive her for shattering the life we had built together, for hiding so much of herself from me? I don't know if I can do that, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you. Emily's face fell, but she didn't argue. She just nodded, as if she had expected that answer all along. I understand, she said quietly. I'm not asking you to forgive me right now. I needed to tell you the truth, to give you the chance to decide for yourself. I turned away, my mind racing. Everything was spinning out of control, and I didn't know how to stop it. The woman I loved was standing in front of me, asking for forgiveness, but I didn't even know who she was anymore. She was a stranger, someone I couldn't recognize, no matter how much I wanted to. I need time, I said, my voice hoarse. I can't deal with this right now. I need to figure things out. Emily nodded again, her expression unreadable. Take all the time you need, she said softly. I'll be here, waiting. In whatever version of reality you find yourself in, I'll be here. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The weight of everything she had told me was pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I needed to get out of there, to escape the suffocating feeling of being trapped between lives, between versions of myself that I didn't understand. I walked out of the room without looking back, the door closing behind me with a soft click. The world outside felt cold and distant, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't quite see. My mind was a mess, a jumble of thoughts and emotions that I couldn't untangle. I didn't know where to go, what to do. All I knew was that I couldn't stay here. Not like this. Not when everything I thought I knew had been torn apart. As I walked through the streets, the words she had spoken echoed in my mind. In every version of my life, I loved you. But love wasn't enough. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. I didn't know where I was going. I just kept walking, hoping that somewhere along the way, I would find a version of myself that could make sense of all of this. A version that could forgive her.